Hi there, everyone. In front of us, we have a very large pile of Malazan novels. And what we're going to do in this video is something that's been requested quite a bit. There's a lot of discussion in the Malazan fan community about the order you should read the Malazan books in. Now, of course, we're not just talking about the 10 Malazan books of the Fallen. Hang on, did I say that right? The 10 book series, Malazan Book of the Fallen. That's the main series. It's completed. It's the main Steven Erikson series, and it stands alone. And you can read it, and it's an amazing experience. A fantasy series like no other. But if you want to take it to the next level, you can read the Malazan Book of the Fallen with the E&C Esslemont novels interspersed throughout the series, instead of just reading them separately, like, say, when you're done the Book of the Fallen. There's several of these novels of the Malazan Empire by Esslemont, and they pick up on characters and threads that you get pieces of in the main series, but maybe they're not brought to fruition fully, or there's places they're going that are kind of peripheral to what's happening in the main story of the Book of the Fallen. So the issue becomes, well, if you want to get kind of the optimum experience, which book by Esslemont would you read at which point in the main, between books of the main series? That sentence didn't come out right. If you took the 6 Malazan Empire novels and then the Malazan Book of the Fallen, 10 books, so you've got a 16 book series, so to speak, what order would you put the books in? That's what I'm going to try and help you with today. Now, if you're completely new to the series, maybe this topic is not totally of interest because I'm not really going to talk about the storyline much. So this video is going to have like basically no spoilers. You'll hear about maybe the kind of stuff you'd hear in a movie trailer, but we're not going to talk about the story much. And honestly, it'll be to such a low level of detail that you'll probably forget about what we talked about by the time you come across any of those moments in the series anyway. But this is my opinion on the way you should read these books. I think, from what I've read online, I think this is the best reading order. So you can go poke around and see if there's something else that you think makes more sense. But I'm telling you, you might want to trust me on this. I'm pretty sure this is the best way to go. So let's get started. Now, first of all, I do want to point out that some people talk about, the ultimate reading order, which is where you take all the other trilogies apart from these 16 books, and even the short stories about the necromancers, and you try and work those in. I'll just make a comment about those for now because we're not going to talk about those much. Those are pretty straightforward. We don't necessarily need to make a video about those because like the new Esslemont series is about Kellenved and Dancer and how they rose to power and prominence. And that's a prequel. You don't want to read that before you read the main series. And there's a debate as to whether sometimes people don't want to read those kinds of prequels at all because sometimes they just don't live up to what the characters are built up to be. It's kind of better to leave some things to the imagination. It's like the Darth Vader thing. Darth Vader might have been cooler without the prequels, which made him perhaps seem less cool. Anyhow, I'm not saying that argument necessarily applies, but in any case, the prequel of Esslemont, which is about the rise of Kellenved and Dancer, read that after all of these. And then the other prequel, which is kind of the mythical Carcanis trilogy, which is Erikson's prequel trilogy about more like Mother Dark and all that kind of stuff. That's also basically a prequel trilogy. It would be insane to read that before the main series, in my opinion, anyway. And then there's going to be a Karsa Orlong sequel trilogy, which obviously comes after all of this, so you would want to read that after all this. Kind of a no-brainer. So the only real controversy is where you do these 16 books in relation to each other, in my opinion. So let's think about this. Since we're several minutes in and we haven't actually gotten to putting these books in order. So first of all, nice and easy, start at the beginning. Gardens of the Moon. First book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, Stephen Erikson. It is the first book published, the first book chronologically. Well, no, actually, that's not true. Might as well bring up a topic right now. One of the reasons there's a debate is because Midnight Tides is a prequel to kind of all of this in a lot of ways. And you know, you might think, oh, well, read book 5 first because it's prequel. Don't do that. Leave this for later. Gardens of the Moon. Now, the first controversial choice I'm going to make here, which some people don't appear to agree with, is I'm going to say definitely read Knight of Knives right after Gardens of the Moon. Knight of Knives becomes somewhat less cool in terms of some of the things you learn about. The longer you wait. Now that's especially true for the following book, Deadhouse Gates. So basically, there's some characters in Gardens of the Moon, and there's some theories about them, and those theories are confirmed and the history of those characters explored here. You can kind of confirm the theories in this book as well, but it's much less interesting in my opinion. Kind of filling in the blank here just fits perfectly following this book. I think these complement each other very nicely. And the way you kind of learn some of the secrets in this book it doesn't really have the same effect as the way you learn here. And there's some things that come out in this book that really set the tone for some things that are going to happen later and leave you wondering and looking for clues. And I just think it's very complimentary to the series to read this here. A lot of people are going to say read this much later, but Knight of Knives, it's basically a prequel to Gardens of the Moon. It's awesome. Read it after Gardens of the Moon. A lot of people will say otherwise read it before you read Bone Hunters, which is the 6th book in the main series, Malazan Book of the Fallen. You don't want to read it any later than Bone Hunters, in my opinion. That would be somewhat unfortunate. But yeah, strongly consider reading it here. It's good. Then you're going to go to Deadhouse Gates. Now, Deadhouse Gates, much bigger book. You can see it's kind of like the size of both of these combined. So the series is starting to get a lot more serious now. This is the 2nd book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. No-brainer, 2nd book published. And then the next one's easy too, because you're just going to go to Memories of Ice. These books kind of happen at the same time in relation to each other. So some characters from Gardens of the Moon are going to go in this direction, and then this book is going to go revisit everyone who didn't go to Deadhouse Gates, basically. Memories of Ice is crazy. It's a very epic book. It's the 3rd book in Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's going to be your 4th book in the series here. What else have we got? Well, we've got more Erikson books for a little while here. I'm just trying to... Okay. House of Chains is the next book you want to read. House of Chains basically picks up after Deadhouse Gates the way Memories of Ice picks up after Gardens of the Moon. Does that make sense? So House of Chains is straightforward. Fourth book, Malazan, Book of the Fallen. But there is an issue that comes up here that I want to discuss. So there's Midnight Tides. Midnight Tides is the fifth book, which you should definitely read after House of Chains. But some people might say, oh no, you should read Midnight Tides first. Because there's a character in this book, and he's kind of in a bad situation. And this book is kind of the prequel to his story, and it explains why he's in a bad situation. But really, you don't want to do that. The reason this is so effective is because you've read this first. This book is not going to have the same effect if read out of order. Plus, you have to remember you're learning things in order the way kind of the author is intending you to learn them. So don't be dismissive of the way the books came out necessarily. Although I'm kind of violating that rule here because I think this was published quite a bit later than that. Anyway, where are we now? So, another Erikson book. You're wondering where's all the Esslemont books? Well, we're going to get to that. Hang on. Where are we? Let's just do a quick overview here. So you see where we are. We're up to the first 6 books here. We've got one Esslemont book as the second book you should read. So not much debate so far. It's all pretty straightforward. Here we go. Bone Hunters. My copy's a little messed up. So Bone Hunters is the next book you should read. It's basically the direct sequel to House of Chains, except now you know everything that happened here to build up to that one character's story, which is converging with one of the major struggles of the Book of the Fallen, basically. So here's where things are going to start to get more complicated, because now we're going to start bringing in a lot more Esslemont books, and there's a lot more, I guess, discussion about when you should read those. But what I'm going to say is, first, after Bone Hunters, you should read Return of the Crimson Guard. I'm actually going to bring this down here. Okay, Return of the Crimson Guard is basically a sequel to kind of the main Imperial storyline, or one of the main Imperial storylines in Bone Hunters. And that thread is interesting, and it doesn't really get addressed later on. So, at least not to the degree and detail and epicness of Return of the Crimson Guard. Now, Return of the Crimson Guard is awesome. It is like a really awesome action-packed book. It's a lot of fun. You definitely should read it because it fills in an important part of the story, and it's awesome. It's one of Esslemont's best books, I would say. But here's the thing. What I would say you should read next is Reaper's Gale. So, Return of the Crimson Guard, or let me put it this way. This is book 7 of Book of the Fallen. It's after Bone Hunters in the main series. But there's a gap that happens here. Now, Return of the Crimson Guard takes place in that gap, basically. But there's an issue you might want to consider. Now, obviously, this will spoil some of the things that happen in this, and vice versa as well. This gives you some information about the ending of this that, personally, I think it's a good trade-off. But you should just be aware going into that's how it works. I think this is the natural place for this, right after Bone Hunters, and Reaper's Gale should follow that. But some will argue maybe that you should do it like this. But there's some other reasons why you might want to do it this way, especially if you want to split up the Erikson Esslemont reading. So let's see. The next one, after Reaper's Gale. So how many books in are we so far? Got 6. We're 9 books in. We got many to go. So this, I think, is also where it's tricky. But I would say you should read Stone Wielder by Esslemont. And it has to come after Return of the Crimson Guard, of course. It follows up to some things in that. And it also takes place after this. Or actually, is that true? They're kind of entangled, I guess. I think you should read this after this one. But I don't necessarily think it would hurt if you read this right after Return of the Crimson Guard, but I wouldn't do that. You want to get to Reaper's Gale because there's crazy stuff happening in Bone Hunters. And you want to resolve some threads with this book, and then you want to continue on those unresolved threads with Reaper's Gale and get to that. You don't necessarily want to create big unnecessary delays in resolving some of the crazy plot lines that are going on. This seems to be the best choice, in my opinion, for this, followed up with Reaper's Gale. So continuing on, where is it? Where is it? Here it is. Nope. Here it is. Okay, Toll the Hounds you should read. Toll the Hounds is 8th book in the main series, and it returns to a lot of these characters in Memories of Ice, but it's bringing a whole bunch of other characters from the other books to this setting, like kind of the first continent where the story first started taking place. It's pretty interesting. It's very big. It is a weird book, and what ends up happening is there's some things that are developed that actually get followed up on in Orb, Scepter, Throne. Now, this part's tricky. By the end of Reaper's Gale, you're building to the grand finale of the main series. You're kind of on the final continent. You're back on the continent of Midnight Tides for the grand finale. Everything's converging there. But then there's a lot of stuff that's going to be read before that if you do it this way. What I would say is Stone Wielder makes sense to go here. It's not even that long, and it's a pretty good quick read. Toll the Hounds is huge, and Orb, Scepter, Throne, you could read a little later, but honestly, it's a really good follow-up to Toll the Hounds, and I don't think you necessarily want to read it after Dust of Dreams, because you might want to go straight to the Crippled God after that. You could leave this for the very end, though. I don't think that would hurt very much, or at least not the very end, but I mean after the Crippled God, book 10 of the main series. But I would actually recommend probably doing it this way. Toll the Hounds, go directly to Orb, Scepter, Throne, because these books go together really nicely. They're same setting, a lot of the same characters. And then you're back to basically the grand finale. So you got Dust of Dreams and the Crippled God. We're going to stick them back here. So these two books are book 9 and 10 of the Book of the Fallen. It's the craziest grand finale you could probably imagine. I mean, you could put Orb, Scepter, Throne here, but these books are more closely connected and don't leave you feeling like the closure that most of the books give you with Dust of Dreams. You really want to move on to Crippled God afterwards. Orb, Scepter, Throne, it would fit in pretty good here in terms of the story. I think it might have been published around then. But I'd say do it this way. Once you got Orb, Scepter, Throne down, you've kind of resolved this stuff. Then you're on to the grand finale here. And then nice and easy at the very end, all you do is hop to these last books, and they don't really they're kind of separate, but they let's say hint at things that happen here that make it so you definitely want to read them after Crippled God. Um, a sail here, that refers to things that go all the way back to, I think it's first brought up in Memories of Ice back there. Um, yeah, well, that's a long time ago, and it's kind of hinted at throughout some other books. But yeah, you're finally getting that to that at the very end. There's some strange revelations in this, but it's a good place to leave it at the very end. So I think that's pretty much it. We've covered every book. So again, Gardens of the Mood, Night of Knives, Dead House Gates, Memories of Ice, House of Chains, Midnight Tides, Bone Hunters, Crimson, Return of the Crimson Guard, Reaper's Gale, Stone Wielder, Toll the Hounds, what's it called? Orb Scepter Throne, Dust of Dreams, The Crippled God, Blood and Bone, and A Sail. 16 books. That is the Malazan Book of the Fallen, intermingled with Ian C. Esslemont's novels of the Malazan Empire. If you want to read the ultimate 16 book customized Malazan series, you don't have to do it this way. You could just do the main series and then read the Esslemont books at the end. You could mix things up, of course. Some debate about where Night of Knives should go. Make sure you read it before Bone Hunters, though, because there's characters that it introduces here that come into play a little bit in Bone Hunters, and it's kind of nice to have the background so they have some relevance, greater relevance to you in terms of what they're doing there, and reveals some interesting stuff about the background, about some special locations in the Malazan world and some of the new gods that have arisen in the world. So let's see. Yeah, Night of Knives, or not Night of Knives, I'm all mixed up. Midnight Tides, which kind of sounds the same if you garble it together. Midnight Tides is sort of a prequel. It takes place before all of this. Or maybe not before Night of Knives. I'd have to check the years. But story-wise, it's best to have kind of the flashback scene at that point in the series. Return of the Crimson Guard. You could read it after Reaper's Gale, but I don't think that's the best idea. It's a good follow-up to this chronologically. It's a good follow-up story-wise, and the way it reveals information. It does reveal some stuff at the end here. It's a trade-off. I mean, I think it's good. Like I said, Stone Wielder follows up Crimson Guard. Toll the Hounds and Orb Scepter Throne. Those go very nicely together, and if you keep them together, they won't interrupt Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God, which can be viewed as one super book. Finish things off with these ones, which continue off from Stone Wielder and such. Good books, man. Good books. So this is an excellent series. You might have some different ideas about the order, so you could put those in the comments section. I think that's about all we want to say here. Kept it pretty abstract, not too many story details, but trust me on this one. This is probably the best way to go. I really can't think of a better way, even though I know there's arguments to do it differently. I think you would get the best experience this way. Where I'd say you might find the most controversy is maybe here. Maybe people wouldn't say read that here for other reasons, but again, it's a sequel to a lot of the threads in Toll the Hounds, and it kind of wraps up a bunch of that stuff, so you can go on and wrap up a bunch of this stuff. And when I say a bunch of this stuff, I mean the main series, basically. The main book, The Fallen, the main conflict is resolved there. Yeah, so that's it for today. I hope this was somewhat useful. If you want to debate or comment or whatever, yeah, leave some comments. That's cool. And we'll try and make some other Malazan related videos. I hope this was useful for somebody. If you go ahead and read Malazan in the 16 book super series, you are a hardcore fantasy reader. Talk to you later.